Agfa color or Agfa Neue is basically the base for every modern film stock. Yasuhiro Su was a major Japanese filmmaker, preferred Agfa film stock to Kodak since the latter made the sky too blue. And Rainer Fassbinder, he uses color as a way to create emotion, as a way to work his idea throughout the film.
Welcome to Colorist Meetup, a podcast dedicated to professional colorists. In our second season, we're taking a slightly different approach, and we are focusing on amazing work of graduates of Color Training Masters program. On their journey to graduation, they had to deliver a white paper and a research, and some of them are just absolutely fascinating. We're not only going to learn incredible things on subject of color grading, but also we're going to meet the future and rising stars of color grading world. If you're interested to learn more about this master's program, please head over to color.training. And don't forget to subscribe and like and share to help us reach more people interested in color grading like you. Camilo, welcome, and thank you very much for joining me today in this podcast. I'm very happy that we finally meet, even though we live in the same city. Sometimes it's very hard actually to meet.
Yeah.
But as you
It is.
know,
Thank you.
yeah, I always start these conversations with one question, which is how did you become a colorist that you are today?
Right. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure. I agree with we have seen each other like two times, even if we live in the same city. I think we are neighbors almost, so it's fun. Um, well, it's interesting that my path to colorist, I guess, because I really graduated as a sociology. I studied sociology. And there I became interested in images, in particular photographic images, and how you build, let's say, socio-cultural concepts around imagery, right? And that led me to a path of learning photography. That later led me to graphic design. And I ended up working for the media industry, like in TV channels, broadcast networks, doing art direction, basically in motion graphics, graphic design. Although I used to work also as editor and you name it, like every single job you can find inside a TV station, at some point I did it. That was part of my life for 20 years, I guess. And then I got what is called an artist green card to be to come to the US and live and work in the US based on artistic achievements. And there I wanted to move from motion graphics and design and come back to photography, actually. In doing that, I fell in love with filmmaking, experimental filmmaking, and I started doing 16 millimeters and super 8 millimeters. And I wanted to know how to process my films.
Mm.
And then I mean, I need to say it, I found your color training classes,
Mm-hmm.
and I just discovered, okay, let me take these classes because I need to know how to process my own stuff. I mean, I want to learn how to
Mm-hmm.
process the films, right, in terms of color.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an amazing discovery because I mean, I did it because I wanted to learn how to do it, and then I just fell in love. Like this is awesome. I mean, where have you been all my life? Moment. That what I didn't know this before, right?
Okay.
And that was basically my path to color grading. I learned. I wanted to learn how to do it, and I just fall in love.
It's incredible. It's incredible actually how quickly you mastered grading. Then, if you think about it, because it's maybe 2 years, isn't it, since you started training with us, like about 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, yeah, 2 years. I mean, it was really hard at the beginning because you get into this rabbit hole of all the technicalities, all the technical jargon, and it's like, oh my God, what is this? What is the PQ cure? What is the cure? What is this? What is that? But then, I mean, if you kind of let it go a bit and focus on the aesthetic part, I think that at least in my case, it was a better way to understand the technicalities
Mhm.
rather than, learning all the technical stuff first. I think I was more into why this look the way it looks, or this movie, or this commercial, or
Mhm.
whatever. It's what makes this color pop, or this shadow, be so dark but it's not crushing. So that was for me, honestly. It took me all this time, the two
Mm.
years, to become confident or to
Yeah.
avoid some rabbit holes.
Yeah, but I have to say the quality of your grading is just unbelievable. Like I started noticing your work maybe a year ago or something like that first. I was very surprised, especially like when we were doing the Look Academies, and then you were
Right.
submitting this kind of absolutely wonderful film emulations that were like, and then, that's where I realized that you're not just kind of following our instructions, but you're using your knowledge, that you gathered of film and kind of reapplying it in a digital domain. And I still, believe that some of the best emulations I've seen were those that you did, in the academies. I think they were just absolutely amazing. They were so accurate, so to say, right, and realistic. And yeah,
Thank
so
you.
so no, I really, really, like, also was so taken by your thesis as well, I have to tell you, because, and not just me, like, where everybody who's reviewed it, has actually kind of pointed out that you did such a wonderful, wonderful piece. And which, by the way, is it was selected, as the best work, and you won an award as for the best student of, the semester. And I want to
Okay,
congratulate you
great.
for that. By the way, this is a huge thing, because the competition was fierce. It was
Great.
absolutely fierce.
Yeah, it
And
was.
actually, I enjoyed so much, when you were presenting it in LA. um, and I really felt like, oh my God, this is such a, wonderful, moment. Especially, we had such a, members of the Colorist Society, color scientists, famous colorists in the audience, and they were all like, afterwards told me, my God, we learned so much about Agfa stock with stuff that we didn't know, and it really sparked a lot of interesting conversation.
Yeah,
Why, by the
I need to say that I was terrified that day when I saw, Walter Volpato, Joshua Pines, the woman
Lynette,
I don't
yeah,
remember.
Lynette
Lynette,
dancing,
Lynette.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was, what am I doing here? It's like I wanted to run away, like, oh,
It was,
but it's
listen,
good.
I
I
think
mean,
it was actually excellent. You did an
yeah,
excellent
I,
job. I think.
I think one thing I need to say that learning these 2 years is to trust the process. It's like when you trust the process and you just let it go and just try to do it step by step. Somehow you on one hand you get your discipline going on, you know. And the other hand is you just stop worrying about some stuff that maybe doesn't let you to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I don't know, being afraid or being scared or something. But yeah, that was something good to
Yeah.
and I did that with the thesis also, right? I mean, the thesis was really, it was quite a journey to work in the thesis because I mean the last time I did a thesis is 30 years ago or something like that, and doing all the research, you know. First, it was great to do all the research and to look for things,
Mm-hmm.
and but second, it was hard to make the thesis because of the lack of information available online, and that make
Mm-hmm.
it really a challenge because of course if I wanted to do this mm, I would say in a proper scientific way,
Mm-hmm.
I should be, you know, traveling to Germany or to any film museum that exists in the world that have some Agfa material to really make a comparison with some other film stocks.
Mm-hmm.
So for my thesis on Agfa, I thought, well, let me work with the tools at hand.
Mm-hmm.
What do I have? I have movies that
Mm-hmm.
were shot on Agfa,
Mm-hmm.
and I have DaVinci Resolve in this case to read with the scopes the
Mm-hmm.
characteristic of those films, knowing that it won't be scientifically accurate, but at least I will have an approximation or a perception
Mm-hmm.
of what make these movies look the way they look.
So Camilo, and why did you choose this subject of Agfa for your thesis? What was the reason behind it?
Okay, that's an interesting question because since I've been in love with films and in particularly old films, I noticed a difference between films shot on Agfa, film shots on Fuji, on Kodak, or the old Technicolor stripe process,
Mm-hmm.
strips process.
Mm-hmm.
And I was interested in Agfa because of a quote I read
Mm-hmm.
from a filmmaker, a Japanese filmmaker called Yasuhiro Ozu.
Mm-hmm.
He was and he is still a big name on filmmaking. He's one of these masters, you know, like Akira Kurosawa or from that era, you know, the
Mm-hmm.
big names, John Ford, Yasuhiro Su, Bergman. So Yasuhiro Su really worked most of his life using black and white film. And when he jumps into color,
Mm-hmm.
he decided to use Agfa instead of Kodak or instead of Technicolor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because of economic restraints, I don't quite know. But the thing is that he made this interesting comment about he loves he loved to use Agfa because the way Agfa renders reds. So I got interested in that. Like why is there something like a different render of color for every single film stock? Like Agfa is so particular, so that got me, and I got interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically my interest, my inspiration was let me see if I can find a pattern or in these Agfa films
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that somehow can prove what he's saying as a quote, because that is an aesthetic approach, right? Can
Mm-hmm.
be really subjective, but maybe there is something. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
there is something. I don't know. So that was my point in the thesis. Like,
Beautiful, yeah.
mm,
And you know what? I mean the fact that there isn't a lot of resources out there about Aqua, which made it like even more interesting for all of us, right? Because we were like, stunned by everything that you found. So yeah, so take us through your thesis. We'd love to now see it and learn about Agfa a little bit more.
I needed to create to have some constraints for the thesis, and I decided to, instead of analyzing or making a strict technical analysis, I wanted more to have perceptual analysis or an artistic analysis of about Agfa. So for that, as I said, I decided to use films, existing films, maybe as a remaster, 4K or 2K films, or all films, film grabs from different sources on internet, and using the tools provided by, in this case, Da Vinci, the scopes to have a reading on how color works on those movies, right? Or how color behave, to say it more properly, right? As I said, there isn't really too much information in terms of technical information regarding Agfa. The major available online resources came from this website, amazing website called filmcolors.org, that basically has a timeline of the whole history of color in film. I needed to make a really thorough research on movies, looking for movies that actually in their credits have Agfa, shot on Agfa film. Interesting, many movies shot on Agfa were printed on Kodak film, which is quite in particular some films from the UK, they were printed on Metro Color, which it was, as some people know, Metro Color, it was just a proprietary Kodak film of Metro Golden Mayer. From a conceptual mindset, what really interested me about Agfa is how it can give you a bigger or a wider idea of how color can behave in certain situations. Because I think that in nowadays, where we have this proliferation of digital image and cameras, there's something that is always lacking in this realm of digital imagery. And I think it has to do more, rather than the film stocks per se, with the limitations that were embedded on those film stocks. They never were intended to work as a accurate representation of reality, like we have today with a digital imagery. It was more those film stock, Kodak, Agfa, Fuji. They were more about having a pleasing image to the eye. And the thing is that those cameras, even the most perfect camera, film camera, it has some imperfections. It has some distortions, some weaving, some flickering, some the grain itself on the film stock, the way each film stock render color. Those were more about having limitations than having, a full spectrum of possibilities. And I think in the case of Agfa, it has some particular limitations, and I wanted to check if that was true, because the filmmakers I researched, they mostly said that they love Agfa because it was less artificial. It was more the real world.
To their eye.
So they were
Yeah.
for their eye,
Yeah.
and it's also a philosophical thing that got me interested in this, is that they were kind of using this Agfa film stock as an answer to Technicolor or Kodak, like in a way that they were answering, and we are here going to the rabbit hole of filmmaking, that they were kind of answering in philosophical terms, that we don't want our films to be Technicolor films, because we want to show reality. I was, okay, let me check, let me see, is this really happening? or is more subjective stuff?
I'm terribly sorry for interrupting, but I just have to tell you about something really interesting. If this is a type of content you really like, I wanted to let you know about a group we have created called the Art of Color Research Group, where if you become a member, you get every month new seminars, new guest lectures, and also you get access to the world's biggest library of research papers on subject of color grading, as well as a library of more than 20 guest lectures by some of the Hollywood's biggest, and also library of seminars on subjects like DCP, ACES, color management, camera matching, live grading, and so on and so on. Also, you have a chance to use a special GPT tool that's going to help you develop your own DCTLs. You get access to some really cool tools for color management and LUT design, and you just become part of this amazing colorist research community. Head over to color.training and look for Art of Color Research Group.
So based on that, I of course went and did a historical background first. Really did an extensive background on the thesis. On this deck, I will just constrain to the most important milestones, I would say. Agfa started as a dyes and chemical company, maybe working for fabrics, possibly. And they really pivot to photographic elements or products at the end of the 19th century. For the beginning of 20th century, they were all into creating photography products or photographic products. And the thing is that during the 30s, they come up with this idea of having the Agfa Neue film that was first in opposition to Technicolor or the first attempt of Kodak. This was the first integral three-pack. That means that the same film contains everything that it needed to be processed and get the color right away from the development. It wasn't like Technicolor or maybe Kodak that needed an extra process. And what is interesting is that they were concerned of having a consumer product, people that wanted to not only shoot photography, but also shoot home movies. And they were in this world of, can we create a film stock that can serve a variety of purposes? Like, let's use the same film for slide, for print, for filmmaking. And they were more into that. Sadly, of course, they were caught into the Second World War. Well, as you know, everything that was in Germany at that time, it used to work for the Nazi regime. So they use Agfa as a propaganda tool to counterpoint the dominance of Technicolor and Kodak. I will show you later a comparison of to what they wanted to, what they were fighting. Just to have a sense of Agfa versus Technicolor. What happened after World War II is that Agfa will just split on different companies, different names to serve different markets. And there was something called Field Information Agency technical reports that the Allied forces did, British and American intelligence. And they did a thorough report on how Agfa color work. There is a scholar that suggests that since these reports were open, were public, that possibly has to do with some innovations or improvements that at the era some competition or some competitors did, like mainly Fuji or Kodak. That I don't know. I don't really have proof of that. This is
But the timing
just
is
something
right. I
that
mean, this is exactly,
yeah,
after the war, then we have 50s where the street
right,
protests came, and then, Aqua was kind of doing it already, right? So,
right.
so kind of
I mean, yeah,
yeah, it's very
yeah.
likely.
It's possible, and the thing is that they were doing a lot of innovations inside Agfa, and coming up with this three-pack idea that reduces the process, I don't know, to maybe 4 steps. It's amazing. It's mostly you can have your film done, like you can go and do your still photography,
Mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm,
same process. It's
mm-hmm,
not like, I don't know, 28
mm-hmm.
step that Kodachrome needed, or the expensive Technicolor. They will keep doing some innovation through from the 50s, the beginning of the 2000s. They pioneered the T grain that then Kodak really kind of improved, and they were a major player in the film industry. Maybe not that much in the U.S., but certainly abroad, especially Europe, Asia, because the process were cheaper actually,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and film industry outside U.S. it needs to be cheaper. It's not the budget. You don't have the budgets that you can have in Hollywood.
Exactly.
So here we have some plates, some initial plates from Agfa's trial and errors
Mm-hmm,
process, and they for 36, between 36 and 38, they were trying to improve their slides, and we can see here already that there is something going on with the warm tones, or the warm hues, then here is a couple of images from their process, the three-pack process. 3 layers of color sensitive emulsion, and it says that mostly, I mean, to a lesser or greater degree, Agfa color or Agfa Neue, it's basically the base for every modern film stock,
mm-hmm.
right? Because it has this um, the dies integrated to the film stock.
Ah,
You
yes.
you can see there is a, I mean, there is a description of how the development process is, and you can see it kind of resembles how today the film process
The
is.
ECN2
Uh,
works, yeah, from Kodak.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, Somehow the idea of the characteristic curve
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
there, that
mm-hmm,
is really interesting, because we're seeing here images from 1943, and if we can check in today's workflows, the characteristic curves
mm-hmm.
is not that far from what we're seeing here.
Yeah,
So it's really interesting.
yeah, yeah.
And by 1941,
Mm-hmm,
Agfa really made the first color film, like the complete filmmaking. Of course, these are images retrieved online that maybe are faded because of time, maybe uh, they are not regraded or remastered, or keep in proper conditions. The problem with all of this is that it was done for propaganda purposes, for Nazi propaganda purposes. So we have the first complete movie shot on Agfa color, and because of the pressure that the Nazi regime has on the Agfa factory to win the war against Technicolor and Kodak, the U.S. dominancy on filmmaking, they just went ahead. And the problem it was that it wasn't properly done, so they needed to reshoot the film like many times, like for a year,
mm-hmm,
creating different film stock, improving on the fly,
mm-hmm,
basically.
mm-hmm.
Then for 1943, it has more consistency. Still, it lacks some colors, maybe because of, again, it's an old image. And by 1944, they will have this. By the way, this film 1943 is one of the first adventures of Baron Munchausen
Mm-hmm.
they did. We will come back to this later, because there is an interesting quote about by somebody that saw a remaster
Mm-hmm.
of this film.
Mm-hmm.
For by 1944, they wanted to have this. big movie, The Great Sacrifice. But again, I mean, there is too much of warmth, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
if you see throughout it. There is something that is quite off still. So this is the Agfa during the war trying to win the war against Technicolor and the influence that the US has at that time in terms of filmmaking. And it's interesting. In the next slide, I want to show you the war, what they were fighting. And this is Technicolor versus Agfa Color. And this is mostly movies from the same era, from the same year, mostly. And it's interesting what you get from Technicolor, all this expensive, tedious, extensive, slow process versus the intention of, okay, I want to have a consumer or prosumer film stock. Of course, we're seeing different quality of images here, but it's just stunning. You know, when you see Technicolor films from that era compared to what you get from other stocks, it was certainly a big difference. And I think one thing that I can say or I can get as an insight from this slide is that it requires not only more time but also more research and to have a methodical approach. And I think that that's ultimately what made Technicolor win the war, because they just have a paper trail and a proper method and steps and rules and constriction and standardization and best practices, and you don't have that for in Agfa during a Second World War. And I think, well, that kind of hurt the development of Agfa as a film stock. But having said that, here is a copy of that report I told you before. It was called the BIOS final report in the case of the British intelligence agency, and it was called the Fiat report in the case of the U.S. intelligence
Unbelievable. Where did
department.
you find these documents, Camila? This
Um,
is
well,
incredible.
it was part of the research. I found that reading this book, Chromatic Cinema, by a scholar, Richard Misek. He talked about that. He talked about how the
Mm.
Fiat report got into the world, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone was kind of using it to improve their products. And I looked for it on internet. It's funny. I added that as an anecdote because you can really at some time you can buy this Fiat report. It's not secret. I mean, you got your Mimeo for at that time for $40.25. You get all the information about Agfa industry.
Unbelievable.
I mean,
Oh
and
God.
that is actually you can go to or any library and you can get this Fiat report. You can read it all. It's not a secret anymore.
Unbelievable.
And they did this with the complete industry, German industry, like anything, from fabrics to agriculture to cars to everything.
Wow.
Um, it was part of the bounty as as you win the war. The Soviets did
Mm-hmm.
the same, and we will see some examples of that. So what happened after post World War II is that Agfa divides or splits into these many companies. You
Mm-hmm.
have Jeva Color in Belgium. That they were actually working before Second World War. They were like a subsidiary and they were work together. But you will get Orwo on East
Mm.
Germany, which is it's a famous also film stock.
Yeah.
That is
Black and white. Very good. Yeah.
black and white, and they are at this moment they are trying to have the color version to have a comeback. They are actually trying to produce that color film again based on Agfa.
Mm-hmm.
You will have the soft color in the Soviet Union, also color in the US, but Anso Color was already operating in the US during World War, and that was the way of Agfa operating here, just with a name change. And then you will have on Japan what was called Agfa Choshiku Color.
Shashiku color.
Uh, that it's really a name based on the production company, the studio. The studio was Chochiku. And Chochiku was the studio where this Yasuhiro Ozu did everything. All his work was done, I mean, being hired by Chochiku, and they use Agfa. So when he jumps into in color, he will use Agfa.
Exactly.
Um, Here we have more examples. 1953, there is some improvement here. In 1960, East Germany, they made this movie about, it's a sci-fi movie, but what is interesting about this movie is because of East Germany wanted to show to the world this communist propaganda about we all humans are united, we are a brotherhood of humans. It's interesting that they have many ethnic differences throughout the movie. And you will see how Agfa renders skins in different situations. And that is interesting about this movie. You will have black skins, pale skins, brown skins. I mean, the whole spectrum. It's interesting what Agfa does to that skins. Then by 1966, this is a movie that was done in the Soviet Union, and this used what was called soft color. Soft color was also from Agfa, from the original Agfa stuff. The 1970s, 1986, we have here just for as anecdote how great Agfa became. Now we are playing in the big game. We are creating these Agfa stocks. By 1977, they were happy showing, we have this super high speed film stock that is a 100 ASA. It's a super speed. And then you really have the 125 and 320 that will mostly be the norm
Yes.
during the 80s, the 90s, until the end
Yeah.
of Agfa film
This
stock.
is this is the stock that all DPs or cinematographers who graduated anywhere in Eastern Europe, anywhere, have really learned, to use. This was the stock really. That 125 and 320 XT. That was what they learned on, and it was very actually hard to shoot. Had to expose so correctly the stock, which made them be so like a disciplined, with the shooting today. And I think
Right.
there is like, if you speak to cinematographers, they will tell you how they recognize people who trained on Agfa, because they are so precise with the exposure. I mean, listen, you could make a mistake, not even a quarter of a stop, right? It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, basically, in this historical overview, we see how what became just a way to let's win the war. It really became a proper company. I mean, a proper option, a proper film stock to use with his flaws or not flaws, but it was part of the film industry in that sense. It wasn't really Technicolor. Maybe it wasn't that great as Kodak, but it was an option, and you have that option. You can decide. Well, I want to shoot color. I want to shoot Fuji. I want to shoot Agfa. You have options. That is really interesting for us as colorists, because sometimes, and this is part of why I was interested in this look, is sometimes we kind of lack of options in terms of go too fast to make the look how everything else it's looking, right? I, I think we need to open a door or have some window to experiment, because not everything needs to look the same. And I'm not really kind of an advocate of let's create in digital world film because it doesn't make sense. I mean, you can go and shoot on film if you want the film, but I do think that we can take these characteristics from different film stocks and make it work in a digital world. So with that in mind, I thought, okay, we have seen this history, we have seen some samples, but is there something really that you can say there is an Agfa look? As Yasuhiro Su at the beginning, the inspiration said, oh, red is great on Agfa. So what does that mean, really? I found this. It's an interesting project that is going on, I think by the Chicago Film Society. They have this called Leather Ladies, compile these images of lead ladies from different film stocks. And I found that the only one that I found of Agfa. And in terms of look, I found this a film scholar, Jennifer Kapczynski, that says that the look of Agfa color is quite unmistakable. It comprises a palette of graying greens, darkly saturated reds, and warm blues that contrast sharply with the bright tones of American Technicolor. On a cinematographer forum, a famous cinematographer forum, this cinematographer, American cinematographer David Mullen, also described Agfa as a soft, low contrast look that have warm skin tones, but not so much the blues. It's more like go more into the shadows. And here's a review from someone that had the chance to see a remastered Munchausen film from the 1943. He noted that the film has glowing reds and vivacious purples, but weak pastels, pinks, and lifeless beiges, and is not as strong as Technicolor colors. He said, his words, Agfa color looks less artificial. So here is something. There is some explanation of how the colors behave on this film stock. I wanted to see how that will work. For that, I needed to compile a lot of movies that were shot on Agfa. And in that sense, I went through, compiled some movies from Yasuhiro Su and Rainer Fassbinder. Why Rainer Fassbinder? Because he used a lot of Agfa films in his movies. They are mostly revered as big names in filmmaking. Yasuhiro Su was a major Japanese filmmaker. We know that he transitioned to color from black and white. The way he transitioned to color, it was not as a request from the studio, but more about his interest in how color can work as a narrative device, as an emotional narrative device. He have a quote by his assistant cinematographer where he said that he prefer Agfa film stock to Kodak since the latter made the sky too blue. So Kodak for Yasuhiro Su make the blue too blue, and he was more obsessed with red. I went and looked for some movies that I can be certain that was shot on Agfa because it has that at end credits. We have here a movie from 1958 called Equinox Flower. We can see here the red, how it works. Here we have a movie from 1959. Again, when I was doing this research, I was concerned of having not only red elements, but also a comparison between skins and landscape or greenery or the skies. So I can have a wider idea of how this film stock was working. A movie from 1962, I think this was his last movie. After that, I was, okay, let me now analyze using the vectorscope tool on DaVinci what I get from these films, knowing that I'm not working with film scans, knowing that I'm not working with a proper film, but what we can see if we see this movie, on your TV. What I noticed about these films in particular with Ozu using Agfa, I found that they do have some more saturation, the warm tones or even the green. That was interesting, but to see, okay, is this consistent? For that, I did my second case study that was looking for movies by cinema movement from the 60s and 70s, from black and white to color, because he was inspired by American filmmaker Douglas Sirk, that he mostly worked in Technicolor, and his films are, it's like this lavish, saturated, bright colors. He's also, by the way, an inspiration for Almodovar. And one thing that Fassbinder does is that he uses color as a way to create emotion, as a way to work his idea throughout the film. It's not really there because I want to have color. It's that I need that color because it says something or it means something. What is interesting about Fassbinder and the movies we're going to see is that those movies were shot by Michael Ballhaus. And Michael Ballhaus, as we know, he was the cinematographer of Martin Scorsese. So he came from Rainer Fassbinder to Martin Scorsese. Here we have some movies from the 70s by Fassbinder.
The Bitter Tears of Petra von
This
Kant.
was this is one of the kind of the major names or the major titles of Fassbinder. You have this movie here, Martha. As you can see, there is a predominancy of red colors here. Yeah. And you have this, I can say that this George's skin, because I don't know, this is not a remastered version of something, I can really be sure, but you have a sense of the skin is important, or the skin renders in some particular way in this Agfa film stock. And I did the same that I did with Yasuhiro Ozu. I run some of these films vector scope to see how the color behave. And I found that these films shot on Agfa, they certainly have a preferences for warm hues, red hues, rather than blue hues and green hues. Interestingly enough, I'm getting the same results with movies shot probably 20 years from Yasuhiro Ozu movies, and I'm getting some consistency here. The next thing I did was understanding what made Yasuhiro Ozu and Fassbinder similar in sense of working with color. It's interesting that they both mastered their craft in black and white film and then jump into color. So for them, color was an addition to use as narrative device. And it's interesting because what I've learned in these 2 years of becoming a colorist, it's really when you get your contrast properly done, it's somehow the color, then it's an easy ride, because you have mastered something that is really important, that is the relationship between highlights and shadows. When you add color, it adds a different meaning. And that was also what Fassbinder had in common. But I wanted to move ahead and see, let me check the 80s and the 90s. By this time, Agfa was already a serious competitor to Kodak and Fuji. They developed a lot of films, the 100, 125, 250, 320, and 400. That I think it was short-lived, if I'm not mistaken. They also pioneered the T-grain. They were one of the first film stock to have high-speed film stocks with the T-grain. And the thing is that many renowned filmmakers, I mean, we know that Agfa film stock or Fuji film stock are sometimes are used by, let's say, not big names in the industry, but in the case of Agfa, you will have Sidney Pollack, Robert Altman, Spike Lee, Wong Kar-wai, Mike Lee using this film stock. So it's interesting. It was really something that gave something else to them as creators. And I went ahead and I looked for films using Agfa during this time. We have out of Africa, they use Agfa on exteriors. We have this movie, it's amazing in terms of colors, called Life is Sweet by Mike Leigh. This film in particular, it was interesting for me because it was shot on Agfa but printed in color, and you get a different kind of, you get more saturation. I don't know, it has some particular thing. This movie, an important African American movie, Daughters of the Dust, use Agfa. Shortcuts, really a fantastic movie from the 90s that is, all this kind of mess up life intertwined. It's really interesting. Wong Kar Wai, another movie shot by the same cinematographer Arthur Jaffa. He also shot Daughters of the Dust. Spike Lee. And what I did again, let me check how the colors behave on these 80s, 90s movies. And again, I can find that these movies using Agfa, well, they tend to prefer or to favor warm hues and red hues, and not so much blues and greens. I really came to a place where I was, okay, so there is something here. There is something going on. There is a consistency in all these movies shot using Agfa. Can we try to replicate that? Can we use that information to our advantage? Can we use that as a way to come up with creative looks or develop looks? Or develop starting points, to move forward. In this case, from the plethora of plugins that exist to create film stock or to emulate film stock, well, what I have is Look Designer. I've been using Look Designer for a while now. I found it really intuitive and easy to work with. What I like about Look Designer is that in itself is your own pipeline. If it's your complete pipeline from negative to development. And I like that. I've tried some film LUTs, some other kind of tools, and I don't quite get that same result. Kudos to you. I really love it. I mean, it's really, what I love it is that it makes you easy to understand the process, and that is what I like because I understand the pipeline, and because I understand that pipeline, I can reproduce or try to reproduce a pipeline using my notes. And if you allow me, I want to make a parenthesis here. When we were talking at the beginning of our conversation about how important, or when you were talking about how I used to recreate or trying to recreate these film emulations, I think that one thing that I try to approach the colorist in terms of a production pipeline from the point of view of a film stock. So when I build my notes trees, I try to think in terms of a lab, of a laboratory. I try to have okay, here's my film stock. Even if I'm not using a film stock, my color here will work as a film. Then I will have my development phase, and then I have my print phase. So I try to make my pipeline work like a laboratory. And that, in some way, that was influenced by the way Look Designer works, because you have all of these elements. So having said that, I was looking, okay, can we recreate this Agfa look? So for this section of my thesis, I was really interested on if what we can create can be closer to being accurate to the color behavior I've seen through my thesis, using these movies, these references. For the purpose of the test, I work on ARRI White Gamut Log C color space, and I output all my tests to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. I max out some elements on the film stock so we can really see what happens, because otherwise it's too subtle to to notice. For each emulation, we include a clean Rec 709 image for reference to compare with the image with the emulation applied. I use waveforms, vectorscopes, and C graphs and tone maps to accompany the test to showcase the difference between everything. So now we are in the practical realm of the thesis. Now we are working on, let me test this knowledge, you know, because we've been gathering information. Now we need to put it that, I mean, gathering information without putting that on practice it's part of the job, but it's not the complete job in my mind. Why the thesis also was so hard for me, because I noticed at some point that I gathered so much information, it didn't make sense to me if I don't go ahead and try it, because otherwise how you will know, right? I mean,
Exactly.
and that's funny, because that's when my sociology background came into life. I mean, I have a hypothesis. I need now to prove that or disprove that.
Yeah.
So, I can't do it. Just I need to practice that. I need to see it. What I started to do, let me build this Agfa XT1. I mean, Look Designer has two, by now has two emulations, negative emulations. One is the Agfa XT 125, and the other one is the Agfa XTR 250. So I work with both of them, and what I did basically, in a pretty basic way, I was trying to let me just apply the profile, and we can see here the Rec 709 and how the profile really did something to the image. It warmed the saturation, and you start to get in this kind of cyan greenish chips in the shadows, and that is just applying the profile. It's not doing anything else. We can see here how it works. And this is what really interested me, because I needed to see if I get consistency. And the thing is that I get consistency. We are seeing in the top is the Rec 709. In the bottom, we have the Agfa 125 applied. And we can see that in relation with the movies that we've seen, we are getting preferences for the warm hues and the red hues, rather than blues and greens. I mean, we have there, but not in the same amount that we have it, let's say, on the Rec 709 color behavior. We have the tone map here also. We know how somehow you get a little warm shift, like kind of not really that much that you can say, but if you look with a lot of attention, you can see that you have in the highlights some warmth there. And then you have in your shadows, you start getting this split tone tonality somehow. You
It's
start getting
built
this.
in. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I did the same with the XTR 250. Again, we have here Rec 709, the Agfa profile applied. But in this case, it's interesting. We don't get really a high saturated image. It has some characteristic, but it's subtle. It's interesting because that is how it will happen if you are really using a real film stock.
Yes.
You will get more saturation in a lower speed box. I would say 100, 50, 125. You will get more saturation, and that's why some cinematographers tend to expose down when they use film stock, because they will get a more denser negative, which gets more saturated color in the terms of subtractive saturation, not in the term of additive saturation, where you get too much brightness. It's colors stand out because they are just denser, more fat, I would say. We have the same comparison than before. Rec 709 on the top, Agfa 250 on the bottom. We again can see that Agfa behaves in a way where it favors warm tones and red hues rather than greens and blues.
Yes.
We again have the tone map comparison here. It's similar to the 150, but less.
Yeah, less saturated.
Especially especially in the highlights, and not that much in the shadows. You are getting this cyanish, greenish chief in the shadows, but
Mm-hmm.
you have, I would say, a more neutral highlight. I wanted them to try the both film stocks side by
Mm-hmm.
side. We have it here. We can see how the Rec 709 works and how these two film stocks works in comparison to each other. And the insight here is that beyond that we can see how the blues and greens get down in comparison to warm hues, red hues, and that you can get this kind of split tonality. What I found interesting is that you can, or an insight is that you can decide based on this, well, I will use this for a interior or for exterior shot in my workflow
Yeah.
if I want to use these type of profiles.
Interesting, like how the 250 actually, is very kind of subtle in a way, isn't it? You really feel like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it works. It's not in your face stock. I quite, it
No.
definitely, I like it. I mean, there is plenty jobs where you don't want, it to completely reinvent the look, right? You want just to give it, some sort of note of film kind of split toning and that kind of tonality. And I think the 250 is much better for that, isn't it?
Right, right, and the thing is that you're getting this. If you see the example Helen and Joan, you're really getting like a whole container for the skin tones because of the way the Agfa profile make warm hues and red works. I mean, if you see the comparison with the 709, you notice like more difference between the both skins. And of course, if you use the Alpha 125, well, it's too much. It's too much of saturation. Even, of course, we elements here just with the purpose of showing the differences.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But the thing I like from these two profiles, and especially the 250, is that you get a limited, I would say, a limited container for your skin tones. Even if you have different skin tones, like a dark skin tone, a pale skin tone, it works as a unity. That you have somehow a unified thing going on. I mean, it renders really beautiful in that sense, the color scheme, because you don't have these patchy things that some other films don't maybe
they do, yeah.
do. It's weird because you get color, but you are not getting that amount of color. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's balance between, and I think it has to do with what we are seeing, this limitation. But there is something also as an insight. Sometimes saturation doesn't really mean saturation, but rather desaturation. I think that sometimes we need to learn what to take out to enhance something else. And that is a lesson that I got from this thesis, that Agfa really, as a film stock, as an original film stock, they were really concerned on skin tones. And maybe for that make it work, you need to limit everything else because your main thing is your skin tone. Because at the end of the day, if you are doing, I mean, if you are making a movie, let's be clear, the important thing is your character. It's not your scenery, it's not your things around it. It's an interesting way to how instead of saturate something, you just take out some other things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
From this XT 125 to the and 250, we made also a tone map comparison so we can get the idea of how those two film stocks work. And here's an interesting detail to see the Macbeth chart in comparison. So you can get a detailed view for comparison purposes because it's interesting what happens with the reds.
Yes. Especially on 125, isn't it?
Yeah, and what happened with the blues. And
Yes.
seeing this,
Yes.
you get, yeah, maybe it's subtle, but you get the idea that greens and blues are really being limited by the film stock.
Yeah. But devil is in the detail.
Yeah. if you see this Macbeth here, you will say, well, it's not that like profoundly different, right? You will say that it's quite not that much. But when you see that in practice, you get three complete different images. I say that it's quite amazing. Here's a more detailed view of the chart, just to check what happens with the blues and the reds, and you see how the particularly red and yellow, get more enhanced. But again, it gets more enhanced somehow also because some other colors are constrained.
Yeah.
It's a perceptual thing. I mean, of course, there is something going on in terms of technical elements to favor warms and reds. But it's also true that because of our perception limiting and constraining the other spectrums, the greens, the blues, you will actually perceive more of the warms and reds. So it's a compound situation, I would say. We are going here in the end of the thesis. I wanted to give it a try. Not only I didn't want to check only the profiles, but I wanted to give it a try as what happens when you work with these profiles in relation with print profiles. Why? Because a lot of things that make something look like film is this mixture between negative and positive. Here's an example of what happened with Agfa film when printed on Eastman color or Agfa or Orwo color positive, and you say, well, those are three completely different images,
Completely.
and that happens because of the positive. So I wanted to give it a try to that. I used the same time color space than before. For all the thesis, I used the RE White Gamut log C, and the output was Rec 709. And I decided to use, for this section, I decided to use those print emulations that were more closer to original print emulations like Fuji or Kodak. This is, I mean, I went through a rabbit hole here. It's incredible when you have the same negative. We're having the Agfa XT125, no print. As you can see, we have the Rec 709 and the no print, just the negative applied. And look what happened when you start applying positive. And we are not doing anything here to enhance the image in any way. We are just using the print profiles. In this case, I just wanted to show a more detailed view. I did the same for the Agfa XTR250. You have the Rec 79, the 250 with no print, and then you have all the print emulations applied. You get quite different results just because you're using a different print. On this slide, I wanted to have a relation between two famous print profiles. One is Fuji, that was vastly used, the 8503, and then the scientific proof neutral 2383. You get quite a different look using Kodak or Fuji. And this is amazing because you just has opened your possibilities, just deciding to mix one profile, one negative profile with a multitude of
Options there.
different options in
Yeah.
positive. And I thought, well, okay, now I'm prepared to talk about all these tests. Let me and help me to think I can use all this knowledge as a base grade scenario. I can work in combination. I can pick a file and I said, okay, let me start from a negative profile combined with a positive profile. I haven't done anything really to the image rather than just balancing and applying the emulations. And you have four completely different starting points. Also did it with a exterior shot.
Oh, beautiful, huh?
That's it. Basically, What
Beautiful.
I got, I mean, in terms of just finishing this presentation and this thesis, film look profiling in the digital era is great in terms of it can give you starting points that are there, are using all the film history, are using the 100 years we have of cinema in your favor. You don't need to start from scratch in that sense. The other thing that I think it's valuable in terms of the thesis is the importance that I learned about using color in terms of enhancing the emotional narrative of something. It could be a commercial, it could be a TV series, it could be a movie. It's the same. You are using color in terms of enhance the experience of someone that is experiencing a story. I think that will be my main take for this thesis. The last lesson I got from my thesis is that we can use everything that are in the history of color, in the history of filmmaking, as elements that we can use, that we can reuse, remix. It's not, as I said before, it's not about really recreating, but more about remixing things that we know. We can use 1920s timing techniques in combination with some other elements that are more modern or current, and we can get something new. And I think that is important in terms of making a thesis, trying to capture the characteristic of a film stock. In this case, it could be a timing process, a color timing process. It could be a look from a particular film era. But I think the most important thing is that where you can move forward that information, how you're going to use that information, it will how will make you more literate in terms of, okay, I know this, I know how it works, I can use these techniques in a digital environment, I can use this to create new approaches. And I think that is important because sometimes we are too much into the current, into the present, into the trend. And trends are okay, but as any trend, it will end. So I think what I got from this thesis, it's important to have fundamental notions and fundamental information that inform you of processes and how thing works, because that's the long term. And that is my greatest conclusion is we always need to keep the long term inside the big picture. It's not, right now. It's right now works while you have your long term on site. That I would say that is it. Thank you, Dado. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And
Wonderful, Camilo. Really, really, like an eye opening. Like this is for you're so right in many ways. How having the deeper understanding of the process really helps us make the right choices and decisions in our work. So I really hope that everybody else is also going to benefit from your insight into the Agfa as much as we did. I also want to ask you, just for the end, where can we find you? How can we get in touch with Camilo?
well, as you know, I'm based in Los Angeles. I have my website. If you allow me to share it here,
Mm-hmm.
um, my website is I work as an independent colorist under Chromachrome
Uh-huh.
moniker. That is an homage, of course, to Kodachrome. But it's also a game because Chrome is the same thing. It's a color twice,
Yeah.
just one in Greek and one in English. So I have there my information. I have my contact email
Beautiful reel,
in
by the way.
in
I love your
in
reel.
my website. I have a partner that She mostly does client experience and client relationships.
Uh-huh.
I led the artistic. I mean, I'm the sole colorist. You have my Instagram here also.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
You can connect with me on that Instagram. I've been, uploading some tests, some trials and errors here. I'm
Beautiful.
starting. I'm
Beautiful,
starting to get
beautiful,
my
beautiful.
hands. And here are some stills. You can see these are from our last Look Academy.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I decided to have a pretty simple website, I think.
but it works
Um,
beautifully. I love it. I love it, Camila. Love it.
it's chromachrome.com. I hope you
Chromachrome.com.
can chromachrome.com.
I'm gonna put all these details in the notes below. So enable anybody who wants to get in touch with you, to work with you and get some of your film magic and emulation is going to be able to get in touch. And Camilo,
Of
one more
of
time,
course.
thank you very much for this wonderful and educational podcast, really. And
Along.
yes, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you again soon. And I'm gonna closely follow everything that you will be doing. I'm a big fan of your work. So yes, please keep me also posted of any new and interesting things that you are up to.
Sure. Thank you, Dado, really, for giving the opportunity not only to learn, but also, to improve and to get into the nitty-gritty of color grading. I think, I mean, this can be a personal achievement if I haven't had your mentorship. To be honest, I need to say I need to thank you for your mentorship and for sharing and the way I think it's really particular and amazing the way you share knowledge and the way your guest lecturers and speakers. I think you made it look simple, even if it's not. Um, but I'm thank you. I mean, I never really uh, dream about being, in your podcast. So this is kind of a
you,
checkbox,
you earned it. You
checkbox.
totally earned it. You totally earned it,
So
Camilo. And keep up with your amazing work. And we'll do more podcasts like this.
thank you, thank you. I
Have
hope
a
so.
great day, then. Thank you so
You too.
much.
Have a great
See
day.
you soon. Bye,
Bye bye.
Camilo. Bye, bye, bye.